This presentation, we were challenged to compare the short story written by Cornell Woolrich's It Had to Be Murder in 1942 to the 1954 film adaptation Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock. Cornell Woolrich's 1942 short story is narrated solely from a confined protagonist's point of view. It focuses on his internal monologue and the suspense surrounding his suspicions and his observations. There's not much more character-wise or story-wise that we see. It's pretty much solely focused on how Jeffrey's internal ongoings about the situation. In the Hitchcock version, we see more character development, more suspense, more visual acuity. We get more. We build on the story. We get backgrounds and stories and relationships and more characters and more functions and comedic relief. There's more to the story than in the film version than there is in the short story. The plot is pretty much the same throughout both the short story version and the film version. When you get down to the nitty gritty, it is the same. It's observational. It's how Jeffries is solely confined, and he's watching the ongoings of the neighborhood, and he's suspecting the neighbor of murdering his wife, and how he's the only one in that story or in that neighborhood who knows what went on. He's the only one. Had it not been for him, no one would have ever known that the man had killed his wife. Had he not pursued it, the man could have very well gotten away with it. But it also, yes, justice is served in both versions, but at what cost? There's not really a huge cost necessarily in the short story version, but there is more so in the film version, as we see, Lisa Fremont risks her safety, which Sam also does in the short story version. But we see people questioning their morals more. We see how Jeffries indeed breaks a second leg. But in the short story version, how Jeffries is shot at, there's a lot. Jeffries in Woolrich's story, I know when I read it, I envisioned this small, dingy apartment, second floor, third floor, whatever. He can't move by himself. In my mind, I'm envisioning, a quadriplegic who is, he's bedridden, or he's in a chair and he can't get up, he can't move, he can't go up and down the steps. That's why he has a nurse. That he lives a very sad life and he can only look out the window. He can't, he's confined to this itty bitty space. There's no background to Jeffries in Woolrich's version. There's no backstory, there's no career, there's no anything. There's just, hey, there's this man sitting in front of a window and he can't do anything for himself. He has a very perverted sense of watching out the window and watching his neighbors, and it feels just very icky and wrong from the beginning. But you're sucked in by the suspense and what happened to the neighbor's wife. It also isn't explained until, I think, the very, very end of Woolrich's story that Jeffries is simply at home with a broken leg. There's no major disability. He just has a broken leg. Jeffries in Hitchcock's version, same thing, broken leg, perverted sense of, watch out the windows. But you're introduced to Jeffries and shown right away that he broke his leg. And we're given a backstory to Jeffries, that he is a magazine photographer and he's a risk taker and he will do anything to get the shot, to get the story, which plays into how he continues on watching the neighbor and, confiding in Lisa and having Lisa risk her safety, and why it's so important for him to get the story and understand and get justice. There's much more character depth to him. He has a very conflicted personality. He's both very curious, but his morals are questionable. But we see his character grow, and he just becomes, his character all over is just very, very different in the film versus the short story. We are introduced to Lisa Fremont in the film version and not in the short story version. There is no one other than Sam, the nurse, Hal Jeffries, and the police in the short story version. But in the movie version, we are given more characters and we're given more depth and a fluctuation in roles. And there's no love interest in the short story version, but we were given a love story, or not a love story, a love interest in the film version. She starts out, yes, as a love interest, but it's almost kind of like he just has someone on the side, someone to keep him entertained. He's not really like into her in the beginning. He's actually like, he describes her and he's almost annoyed with her presence and doesn't really want her around. But as the film goes on, their dynamic changes. He gets to trust her and want her to be around, and she questions him and she challenges his morals, but she ends up being his hands and his feet where he can't leave the apartment, and she can go, she risks her safety for him to go check out Thorwald's apartment and to be his hands and feet. And she continues to observe and get as involved with the mystery as he is. Stella, we see, replaces Sam, the nurse, in the film version. So he still has a nurse. It's a female, not a male. And Stella as a nurse has more to do with the story than Sam did. Sam just kind of came in and out. He was a background character. He didn't say a whole lot. He was his hands and feet the way that Lisa is in the story. But in a much less involved way than Stella. Stella is, she has a lot more speaking and she has a lot more to do with them and she's more involved, and she then also gets brought into the observation of the neighbor, but she questions his morals kind of even harder. We're all turning into a bunch of peeping toms. She tries to get him to understand what he's doing probably isn't right, but she also brings comedic relief throughout the film, and it's a nice breakup of the tenseness of the situation. There's a lot of symbolism in Rear Window. The Rear Window in the apartment is used as a metaphor for cinema and observation. The watchers being watched or being the watcher, and questioning film and filming people through a lens and seeing these things. The camera lens that Jeffries is using throughout the film to watch the neighbors, it shows how emotionally detached and physically detached he is from the world. He doesn't see that as an issue. He sees that as a tool for him to essentially get the shot, just like he does with the magazine. He's blurring the lines of morality. The neighbors symbolizes different facets of human connection. Miss Lonely Hearts, we see her, she stages a dinner with a fake person. There's no one there. Later on, she goes on to have a suicide attempt. That shows the loneliness, the isolation that we can face in the world, and how we put on a face when we're out and about, and how we pretend that, we're okay and we have this great life and we have, these great things. But then when we go home and we're alone, we're sad and we're isolated, and it can lead to things like suicide attempts, and how absolutely terrible being lonely and isolated is. The Newlyweds show, love and happiness and how great it can be. Just very multifaceted, and it shows human life and human connection through an outside lens. The audience is voyeur. Camera shots align the audience with Jeffrey's perspective, so we're seeing the film through Jeffrey's perspective. We're watching the neighbors every bit as much as he is. We're delved into this situation every bit as much as he is. It forces the viewers to question their role as spectators. Like, is this wrong? Is this right? We're watching from an outside point. We're invading people's privacy, but in a way that it almost doesn't seem wrong throughout the film. But it's definitely, it creates this complicity in what Jeffrey's doing. We're okay with what he's doing because he's trying to solve a murder. He's trying to solve a mystery. Because there's justice in that, we're complicit with it. We're saying it's okay when we all know that it's not okay. It very much makes us question our roles as watchers at any point. The settings between the story and the film are vastly different, at least in my mind. In my mind, when I read the story, the setting is meek, it's mild, it's gray, it's blah. There's nothing exciting about it. It's it just seems very like gray and bland and not exciting. Just very close and I don't know, just not that exciting. Versus in the film version, we see colors and we see it's busy and it's the lighting. We hear the busyness of the suburbs. We hear the urban life. We see different moving parts and we see the neighbors outside and we hear the different things, and it just adds a layer of intensity and what's the word? Um, it adds character to the story. It adds more to the story. It adds a new depth to the story, and you're interested in watching and seeing it. Versus in a story, you don't care much about the outside. You don't care much about the setting because it's just not there. There's just not anything to visualize. There's just not. It's not talked about. The cinematic techniques in this film adaptation are incredible, especially for the time. We see the transition from day to night. We get, the suspense of darkness and shadows and not being able to see what one's doing in the dark, and the way that that adds mystery and suspense. And the way that it just psychologically plays with you and plays with the story, that you simply cannot get that in the short story version. You can't get that on paper. You can't play with the lighting in the paper. You can't or on paper. You can't play with people's minds, and you can't add that layer of suspense that a film version can. The sound just brings, again, a new level of realness and suspense when things are quiet and then all of a sudden there's a loud noise, or it's you hear the urban life but you're focused on something else. It brings the story to life. It brings the characters to life. It puts realness that you cannot get on paper. This absolutely explores the moral ambiguity of this of the whole plot line. Jeffrey's spying is questioned ethically by Lisa and Stella. They're both complicit by the end, because of the happenings with the neighbor murdering his wife. But they, throughout the whole story, are questioning, this isn't right. What spying on the neighbors isn't right. This isn't okay. We're peeking into people's lives. We're being peeping toms. Like there's a layer of grossness and just, you never know when you're being watched, kind of thing. And you wouldn't want to be watched. Why are we doing it to someone else? Justice absolutely gets served, but it comes at a personal and ethical cost. He, cost himself that ethical side of him. He's invading someone's privacy. The only reason he knows about this murder is because he invaded someone's privacy. He was watching through someone's window. And then he has Stella and Lisa doing the same thing. It absolutely leaves the audience to wonder, what's right and what's wrong in his situation. Is it okay that he was watching through the windows because he solved a murder, because justice was served, or is it still not okay? Is it still gross? Is it still wrong? And then, we're watching the film like we were complicit. We also invaded somebody's privacy. I understand it's a fake story, but you have to understand that, like, even fictitiously, like, are we okay with that? Um, Hitchcock's artistic achievements, he just expanded the story and made it this masterful piece. He defended the themes and the morality, the observations. He really just drove home the points that Woolrich was making. He absolutely took Woolrich's story and made it this beautiful masterpiece of a film and put it to life and brought all those questions on everyone. He just created a visually stimulating and beautiful set, and everyone just absolutely enthralled in his movie. And I honestly thought that they were both, I wasn't super into them. I'm not gonna no, I won't lie about it, but they were interesting, and the storyline was interesting, and it was very good analysis practice to have read both the story and the film and see how they differ and see how Alfred Hitchcock just built on that story and the creative liberties that he took and how he enhanced the story and made it better and gave it depth. And I think that he did Woolrich proud and made that movie beautiful creation on top of the story that Woolrich had provided.